In the city that never sleeps, a dying man's last words drag Nero Wolfe and Archie Goodwin into a tangle of power, poison, and deception. Where in the world are you listening from tonight? Subscribe so you never miss upcoming mysteries. I heard my name in a dying man's mouth. Fritz had just balanced my sandwich on a plate the way a Swiss watchmaker sets a jewel when the telephone cut through the brownstone's hush like a saw through velvet. The hour was 11:30, the kind of time when decent citizens are already asleep and indecent ones are negotiating alibis. I was neither, merely hungry. "Office of Nero Wolfe," I said, swallowing rye. What came back wasn't words so much as a man's lungs trying to remember the trick of breathing. A rasp, a cough, then something that sounded like, "Tell Wolfe, he knows," and the receiver clattered. Nothing more, no breath, no line hiss, just the sound of the night thinking it over. I stared at the phone. I'd heard drunks, panickers, blackmailers, and once a woman advertising vitamins, but never a dying man auditioning for tragedy. Upstairs, the elevator cables murmured. Wolfe was turning in. I considered letting it drop. After all, my job description didn't include midnight seances. But curiosity is my occupational disease, and the symptoms flare under mystery and rain. The switchboard operator, bless her insomnia, traced the call. Hotel Lamartine, Midtown, room 912, a respectable joint for salesmen with accounts to hide. I pocketed my notebook, told Fritz to save the sandwich, and went out into a Manhattan that glittered like a wet nickel. Rain slicked the sidewalks, and cabs moved with the caution of men tiptoeing past conscience. At the Lamartine, the clerk raised an eyebrow that said he'd seen it all and charged extra for discretion. "Mr. Delacroix," I told him. He just phoned my employer and hung up halfway through a dying declaration. That got me the key. The hallway smelled of floor wax and bad nerves. When I knocked, nobody answered, so I used the universal key, one solid shoulder. The chain broke with a pop. Inside, the air was full of cheap cologne and expensive death. A man sprawled beside the bed, one hand gripping a half-empty flask, the other clenched around a scrap of paper. He was about 40, smooth-haired, the sort who considered cufflinks a moral duty. Cyanotic lips, eyes half open. If he was rehearsing for Hamlet, the curtain had dropped early. I crouched, checked the pulse. Faint flutter, then gone. The paper in his fist turned out to be half a luncheon menu from the Mercury Club, a place where silence cost $20 a plate. The flask smelled of whiskey and almonds. The room didn't carry that bitter almond trace otherwise. I'd been around enough poison cases to know almonds mean more than pastry. I used a handkerchief to set it aside. I phoned the desk. "Get the police," I said, "and make sure the doctor's not the kind who asks who's paying." By the time the uniforms arrived, I had his wallet open. Name, Martin Delacroix, broker. The card said Eagle and Fenway Investments. The clerk hovered, wringing his hands like a maiden aunt at a prize fight. "Never saw him before tonight," he protested. "Checked in at 8, ordered room service, no visitors." "Except the angel of death," I said. The cops took statements, eyed me as though being awake at midnight were a misdemeanor, and promised to forward everything to Inspector Kramer. That meant Wolfe's morning would start with fireworks and not the orchid kind. I left before they could decide to keep me. The menu fragment felt like a stage cue burning in my pocket. Outside, the rain had upgraded to a drizzle designed by an artist in melancholy. Back at the brownstone, the hall lamp threw a cone of gold over Wolfe's favourite chair. He was still in it, a mountain of brown silk robe and disapproval, holding a book the size of my conscience. "You have been gallivanting," he said without looking up. "I call it civic engagement," I told him, hanging up my hat. "A man named Martin Delacroix just died at the Lamartine. His final words were, 'Tell Wolfe he knows.' I thought you'd appreciate the compliment." Wolfe closed the book, marking the page with a finger thick enough to start rumours of ancestry with bears. "Pfui, you could not resist meddling." "Call it field research. He had a torn menu from the Mercury Club. Recognise the place?" "An establishment for financiers who mistake wealth for wit. I dined there once, invited regrettably." "He also drank cyanide, unless whiskey suddenly comes with nuts." That got his eyes open. "Cyanide, then the police. We'll ring before long. Kramer never misses a confrontation. You'll have to postpone your orchids." He sighed, which in wolf speak means he admitted reality existed. "Describe him." I did. Wolfe's eyes half closed as if conjuring the corpse in his mind's vault. "Delacroix," he murmured. "I recall the name, an associate of Talbot Vane, a notorious manipulator of the market." "So you did know him?" "I know of him. That is different. Yet his final act suggests he imagined I possessed knowledge pertinent to his peril. He knows, indeed." He tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared, silent and solid, bearing a tray with coffee strong enough to raise Caesar. "Thank you, Fritz," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin will require caffeine to fortify his indiscretion." I took the cup. "If you'd rather I hadn't gone, I'll remember that next time a man phones from the edge of eternity asking for you." "Do so," he said dryly, "and you will still go." Touché. The front bell rang at precisely 12:40. I didn't need X-ray vision to see the cigar smoke trailing behind Inspector Kramer as he came in. He looked like a bulldog who'd swallowed a lemon but couldn't admit defeat. "Wolfe," he growled, "your boy was seen leaving the Lamartine. Care to explain why?" "Because," Wolfe said, "Mr. Goodwin obeys his instincts rather than his intellect. Sit down, Inspector. Abuse will not revive the dead." Kramer sat, mostly because arguing with Wolfe standing up felt sacrilegious. "The stiff's Martin Delacroix. Cyanide in the hooch. You know him?" "No," Wolfe said. "Mr. Goodwin's account informs me only that he expired uttering my name, which, though gratifying, is insufficient for culpability." Kramer puffed. "He had your number in his wallet. Maybe he wanted to confess something you're mixed in." I said, if Wolfe ever mixed in the market, it'd collapse from grammar alone. Kramer shot me a glare. "You're a comedian. Tell me about that menu you lifted." I slid the torn paper over. Half a Mercury Club menu. He was clutching it like it was bearer bonds. Might mean lunch, might mean murder. Kramer examined it, snorted. "Fancy joint. We'll check who he dined with." "You'll find Talbot Vane there," Wolfe murmured. "And perhaps Richard Coyne, both veterans of manipulation." Kramer frowned. "You got proof or just that fat hunch of yours?" "I have inference," Wolfe said, calm as sunrise. "It has the advantage of being less noisy than yours." I bit my tongue before laughing. Kramer stood. "Fine, but if your inference tangles my case, I'll be back with a warrant that won't respect your orchids." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "And when you return, Inspector, kindly bring reason." Kramer grunted, half salute, half threat, and left. Wolfe watched the door close. "A competent man," he said softly, though regrettably linear. I stretched. "So what's our next move, genius? Wait for the widow to call?" "She will," he said. "Grief and fear both seek intellect. Meanwhile, compile a memorandum, details of the scene, statements from the clerk, and a description of the fragment." I sat at the typewriter. The keys clacked like rain on tin as I filed the dead man into our system. Wolfe listened, eyes shut, possibly memorizing every word or composing tomorrow's menu. Hard to tell with him. When I finished, he opened one eye. "You are perturbed." "Sure," I said. "I don't like being phoned by corpses. It's bad for my social life." "You have none," he said, "and that is why you serve me efficiently." "Thanks. I'll embroider it on a pillow." He actually smiled, a small curve that would have startled the orchids. "Archie, there is mischief here beyond murder. The Mercury Club is not merely a dining establishment. It is a sanctuary for men whose fortunes depend on deceit's discretion. If Delacroix sought me, he intended confession. Someone feared that." "Then we're back in the soup, same recipe. Rich men, poisoned drinks, and your name on the garnish." He nodded once, heavy as judgment. "So it seems. Yet until facts supplant conjecture, we do nothing." "Doing nothing is your department's specialty." He ignored that. "Tomorrow at 9 I shall attend my orchids. At 11 you will contact Saul Panzer to investigate Delacroix's connections discreetly. Not the police version of discreet, the real kind." I made a note. "And if Kramer beats me to the widow?" "Offer condolences, not commentary. The living lie more artfully when comforted." That was Wolfe in a nutshell. Philosophy served cold with mustard. I yawned. The clock showed 1:30. Fritz reappeared silently, retrieved the untouched sandwich, and left as if ashamed of our morals. Wolfe poured himself beer, the foam rising like restrained outrage. "You may retire, Archie. The corpse will not decay further tonight." "Thanks. I'll try to keep pace." I climbed the stairs, the day's tension following like a stray dog. In my room, the city hummed beyond the rain. Somewhere a saxophone practiced sorrow. I couldn't sleep. The phrase kept looping. Tell Wolfe he knows. What did Delacroix think Wolfe knew? About the Mercury Club? About poison? Or about the difference between guilt and guilt by association? The man had died reaching for help, and my boss's name had been the last sound his lungs bothered to shape. That kind of detail sticks, like a burr under logic. At 2 a.m. I gave up and went downstairs. The office smelled faintly of orchids drifting from the elevator shaft. On Wolfe's desk sat the torn menu, flattened under a paperweight shaped like a globe, Our World temporarily anchored. I turned it over. On the back, faint pencil marks. Lunch V. Maybe Vane, maybe Victory, maybe Viper. I smiled without humour. If I'd known it would ruin my evening, I said to the empty room, I'd have let him keep his secret. Then I shut off the lights. By the time sunlight reached the brownstone's blinds, Wolfe had barricaded himself among his orchids, and I was left to domesticate the mail. There's a particular peace that hangs around West 35th Street at 10 in the morning. The milk trucks are gone, the taxis haven't yet decided to honk for sport, and Fritz's coffee smells like an argument you'd rather lose. I was midway through my second cup when the bell rang. Fritz appeared, immaculate as a Swiss moral code. A lady to see Mr. Wolfe, Mrs. Delacroix. The name hit the air like a thrown coin. I told Fritz to show her in and went to buzz Wolfe's plant room line. Visitor, I said. Name rings a dead bell. I am occupied, came the deep voice, resonant as a cello with opinions. She says she's the widow. You want me to tell her the orchids are in mourning too? A pause, then, 10 minutes, seat her. That was as close as Wolfe came to enthusiasm before lunch. Claire Delacroix entered like a lawsuit wrapped in mink. Mid-30s, poised, the kind of face photographers forgive for any lighting. Her perfume arrived half a second ahead of her, confident enough to stand cross-examination. Mr. Goodwin. The same. Mr. Wolfe will join us presently. May I take your coat, or would you rather keep the armour? She smiled without warmth. I suppose sarcasm comes standard here. Only with the coffee. She sat on the red leather chair that has terrified half of New York's upper crust. Her gloves were pearl grey, her eyes anything but. My husband spoke of Nero Wolfe, she began, though not to me directly. Last night the police informed me he died, poisoned. They also mentioned your visit. Strictly social, I said. I drop in on dying men to keep up my conversational range. Her lips tightened. I don't want this made public. The press are circling, and my husband's firm, well, scandal would destroy what's left. I handed her a cigarette. You mean reputation or revenue? Both, she said. But mostly the illusion of decency. You see, Mr. Goodwin, on Wall Street, that's the most fragile commodity of all. The elevator hummed. Wolfe descended, smelling faintly of orchid fertilizer and disapproval. He settled behind his desk, immense and motionless, as Fritz glided in with the morning tray. Coffee, buttered toast, a token nod to civility. Madam, Wolfe said, inclining his head, my condolences. You have come not for comfort, but for clarity. Yes, she said, voice low but firm. The police believe my husband took poison himself. He did not. I concur, Wolfe replied. Cyanide is a vulgar exit for a broker. It lacks symbolism. That earned a startled blink. I bit the inside of my cheek to keep from grinning. She opened her purse and withdrew an envelope. $5,000. For discretion first, truth later. Wolfe regarded the bills as if they were insects pinned for study. I accept retainers for labour, not silence. You shall have both, provided candour is reciprocal. If you lie to me, madam, you forfeit fee and courtesy. She hesitated only a moment, then nodded. Understood. I took the envelope and slipped it into the safe. Fritz vanished, leaving the faint scent of roast beef rehearsing for lunch. Tell us, Mrs. Delacroix, Wolfe said, what compelled your husband to telephone me at his death? Her fingers twisted the gloves. He'd been frightened for weeks. He said he'd uncovered irregularities at the Mercury Club, investments funneled through dummy accounts. He wouldn't name who was behind them, only that if anything happened, I should seek you. Did he explain why me? She shook her head. He said you were incorruptible, which I gather is rare currency. That, Wolfe said, is accurate if unprofitable. I slid open my notebook. Your husband ever mentioned Talbot Vane or Richard Coyne? At the name Vane, she flinched. Talbot Vane is chairman of the club. He was Martin's mentor. They dined together often. How often? Every Thursday. Private room upstairs. That perked Wolfe's brows. The Mercury Club again. Mr. Goodwin, the coincidence grows obese. Maybe it's just well fed, I said. She reached into her bag again and produced a folded scrap. Police gave me my husband's effects this morning. This was among them. It was the missing half of the menu I'd fished from Delacroix's hand, the tear edges matching like puzzle pieces. Across the top, embossed in gilt, the Mercury Club. Well, I said, that clinches it. He didn't phone you for reservations. Wolfe extended a finger, and I handed it over. He studied the seam carefully, nostrils flaring as if truth had an aroma. This unites two halves of intention, he said softly. Mr. Delacroix wished to direct me toward that club. Therefore, what he discovered, and what killed him, resides there. She leaned forward. Can you prove that? Madam, proof is the final dish. First we must gather ingredients. I saw her relax a shade, the way people do when someone sounds certain enough for both of them. I almost pitied her. Wolfe's certainty is often mistaken for mercy. He signalled the bell cord. Fritz reappeared with fresh coffee. Wolfe gestured toward our guest's cup. Cream sugar? Neither, she said. I prefer it honest. That earned the faintest approving grunt from him. Coming from Wolfe, that was practically a hug. Your husband, he said, was engaged in brokerage operations under the firm of Eagle and Fenway. Yes. Do you possess access to his records? She hesitated. I could obtain them. The partners trust me. Wolfe closed his eyes. Then you must not. Trust is a liability. Let them believe ignorance protects you. I interjected. If the partners think you're snooping, we'll be shopping for a new widow. She looked at me sharply. Do you always speak so pleasantly about danger? Only when I'm billing by the hour. Wolfe's tone cooled. Archie. Just keeping morale up, boss. He turned back to her. Mrs. Delacroix, did your husband mention fearing any particular man? No, only that he'd seen figures, balances that didn't exist, and that a name kept appearing, initials H.M. H.M., Wolfe repeated. Possibly Howard Merrill, the political patron of that institution. Mr. Goodwin, note that. I wrote it down, though privately I wondered if Wolfe already knew the answer and simply enjoyed the theatre. She rose, smoothing her skirt. If you can clear my husband's name, Mr. Wolfe, I'll see you compensated beyond the retainer. Wolfe's eyes opened. Madam, my compensation is irrelevant. The truth, however, is not. You will receive updates only through Mr. Goodwin. I detest telephones. That ended the audience. Fritz escorted her out with the decorum of a diplomat smuggling state secrets. When the door clicked, Wolfe exhaled through his nose. A remarkable woman, he said, courage sheathed in calculation. She will lie if necessity dictates. Which puts her in good company. The question is, about what? He looked at me. Find out. That was the official blessing to start legwork. I closed my notebook. She said the club has a private room. I could nose around, maybe ask the maitre d' how many regulars like their cyanide shaken or stirred. Wolfe frowned. Cynicism does not sharpen wits, Archie. However, your presence there is desirable. Observe. Do not provoke. I never provoke. People just overreact. His eyes narrowed, a familiar signal meaning the conversation was adjourned. He pulled the menu halves together again, aligning them with surgeon precision. The Mercury Club, he mused. A fitting name for those whose ethics are liquid. Liquid and toxic, I said. Maybe the decor includes warning labels. At that moment, the telephone rang. I grabbed it. Kramer's voice rumbled through. Tell your boss the lab confirms cyanide in Delacroix's flask. And before you start spinning theories, Goodwin, stay put. We're checking his associates. I relayed the message. Wolfe's mouth twitched. Stay put, indeed. The man imagines inertia is contagious. Maybe he's learning from you. He ignored that. At 1 we dine. Afterward, contact Mr. Panzer. He will verify the widow's statement and the existence of the private room. Discretion paramount. Got it. And if the club asks who's asking, tell them a gourmand considering membership. Your palate will survive the deception. Lunch arrived on schedule, roast beef with mustard sauce that could cross-examine witnesses. Wolfe ate like a man drafting philosophy in gravy. Between bites he said, "Our widow's anxiety centers on reputation, not grief. That is revealing." She cried without smudging her mascara. "That's a skill." He glanced up. "Archie, your penchant for women's details is both invaluable and alarming." "Call it field study." He almost smiled. "Very well. After lunch, compose a summary for Kramer. Omit mention of the menu. Let him discover its absence later. Confusion may yield cooperation." "That's what I like about our partnership," I said. "You handle truth like it's a negotiable bond." Fritz cleared the plates, served chilled beer, and vanished again. Wolfe raised his glass. "To candor, in theory." "To clients, in practice," I answered. At 2:30 he retreated to the plant rooms, leaving me alone with the clack of the typewriter. As I wrote the memorandum, I couldn't shake the image of Claire Delacroix's hands, steady until she mentioned the Mercury Club. Whatever waited behind those mahogany doors had scared a broker into calling Wolfe as his lungs gave out. I finished typing, stacked the carbon copies, and looked at the matched menu halves on the desk. They lay there like evidence at a silent trial. I said aloud, "If money buys silence, somebody just paid retail." The office clock ticked toward 4, and the elevator cables stirred above. Wolfe would be communing with his orchids until 6, unreachable by phone, gunfire, or apocalypse. That left me to think, and thinking, in my line, is where trouble begins. Somewhere uptown, the Mercury Club's luncheon crowd would be finishing their cigars, congratulating each other on survival. They didn't know yet that a dead man had mailed his conscience to Nero Wolfe, postage due. I reached for the phone to schedule a meeting with Saul Panzer. Soon the club would learn that silence, like everything else in Manhattan, had an overhead cost. The next hours moved fast. By late afternoon, I was walking into the Mercury Club. Pillars tall enough to make humility look like a clerical error, and floors polished until they could have doubled as conscience reflectors. I'd shaved twice that morning just to pass the doorman's inspection, but even so, I could feel my tie apologizing for my bank balance. Saul Panzer loitered across the street pretending to read a paper. No one in New York could look less conspicuous doing nothing than Saul. I, on the other hand, was marching straight into Olympus, disguised as an insurance investigator for the Continental Assurance Company, a fabrication endorsed by Wolfe's eyebrow, and a forged calling card that still smelled of wet ink. Inside, the lobby spread out like a mahogany sermon. Brass railings gleamed, oil portraits of men with trustworthy chins lined the walls. A string quartet whispered from somewhere invisible, the musical equivalent of insider trading. I told the desk clerk, "Goodwin, Continental Assurance, routine inquiry concerning one of your members, Mr. Martin Delacroix." The man's eyelids flickered the way an honest soul's would at the mention of tax audit. "Mr. Delacroix is deceased, sir." I read the obituaries, I said. "My company prefers confirmation to poetry." He hesitated, then called for the club secretary, Mr. Evans, a narrow-shouldered man with the moral flexibility of a paperclip. Evans guided me through a corridor that smelled of polish and privilege. "We were all shocked," he said. "A tragic thing. A fine member." "Fine enough to argue with the management?" I asked. Evans' smile congealed. "We don't indulge in quarrels here, Mr. Goodwin. Discussions, perhaps." "Sure, like duels with invoices." He led me into the dining room, marble columns, red velvet drapes, a ceiling mural depicting Mercury delivering profits to mankind. The waiters moved like diplomats balancing peace treaties. At a corner table sat two men with cigars and conspiracies in their eyes. Talbot Vane, silver-haired, senator-voiced, and Richard Coyne, younger, tanned from the light of other people's money. Evans whispered introductions. "Gentlemen, Mr. Goodwin from Continental Assurance. He's making inquiries concerning our late member, Mr. Delacroix." Vane looked me over. "Insurance? How distastefully practical." "It pays the bills," I said. "Sometimes even the ones left by cyanide." Coyne chuckled too easily. "A pity. Martin was careless." "Careless men don't drink poison on purpose," I said. "He ever discuss financial irregularities?" Vane's expression didn't move, but his knuckles did, tightening on the cigar. "Young man, you're treading near libel." "Just routine," I said. "We hear he mentioned falsified balances 2 nights before his death." Evans shifted uncomfortably. "That would have been during Thursday's dinner, private room upstairs." Coyne said quickly, "A misunderstanding. A bookkeeping error, nothing criminal." "Funny," I said. "Errors usually end in corrections, not funerals." Vane rose slightly, towering even while seated. "Mr. Goodwin, we cherish decorum here. The late Mr. Delacroix became excitable. Perhaps guilt weighed on him." I watched him relight his cigar with deliberate calm. That was when he slipped. "If Nero Wolfe wants to—" He stopped, smoke freezing mid-air. I smiled. "I didn't mention Mr. Wolfe." Coyne's eyes darted to Evans. The secretary looked ready to faint into the consommé. Vane cleared his throat. "Your employer's reputation precedes him. It's only natural his name arises when detectives are mentioned." "Sure," I said. "He's the patron saint of professional curiosity." The silence that followed could have been bottled and sold as tension. I finished my coffee and rose. "Gentlemen, if you recall anything helpful, I'll be at the Continental office. We never close, unlike some accounts." As I left, I caught Saul's reflection in the brass door. He slipped in behind me on cue, following at a distance. Outside, the drizzle had returned, polite as the club's lies. We met half a block away. "They spooked?" he asked. "Like choir boys caught with ledgers," I said. Vane nearly choked on Wolfe's name. "Find out who tipped him that I might be sniffing." Saul nodded. "Evans has a bookie in the Bronx. I'll start there." I hailed a cab back to the brownstone. The ride cost 85 cents and a piece of my patience. Manhattan slid by like a polite alibi. At 2:20 I was back at the office. Wolfe was dictating a grocery list to Fritz with the gravity of statecraft. When he saw me, he dismissed Fritz and leaned back. "Report." I gave it, from marble pillars to Vane's Freudian slip. Wolfe listened with eyes half-closed, fingers steepled. "So," he said finally, "you impersonated an insurance investigator, interrogated 3 men, and incited suspicion in all of them." "That's my charm. It keeps me in practice," he glowered. "Your improvisations court disaster." "They also court information, and sometimes they even get a dance." "Phooey." He reached for a beer. Fritz appeared silently with the chilled glass proving telepathy as Teutonic. "The Mercury Club," Wolfe mused, "a sanctum for economic scoundrels masquerading as gentlemen. The mention of my name was no accident. Someone fears exposure." "Or wants you flattered posthumously," I said. Vane looked ready to sue a mirror. Wolfe's brow furrowed. Talbot Vane. Born in Hartford, educated at Yale, once censured for manipulating wartime bonds. His discipline was administrative only. New York forgets easily. "I could jog its memory," I offered. "You will not. Rashness invites retribution." "Retribution pays double overtime." He ignored that. "Did you observe anything concrete?" "Delacroix argued with them Thursday about a falsified balance sheet. They called it an error. If that's accounting slang for homicide, we're making progress." Wolfe grunted. "Archie, acquire a certified copy of that balance sheet. Through Mr. Cohen, perhaps. He will prove the weaker link." "Sure. Want me to promise him immunity or just smile menacingly?" "Neither. Offer civility. It confuses villains." He sipped his beer contemplatively. "The mention of my name intrigues me most. It suggests premeditation. Either Delacroix warned them he would come to me, or they expected he might. In both cases, motive for silence. Meaning they poisoned him before he could phone you, or after, just to be thorough." "Precisely." At that moment, the phone rang. I picked it up. Nero Wolfe's office. A voice I recognized. Evans, the secretary. "Mr. Goodwin, I shouldn't be calling, but Mr. Vane wishes to clarify." I cut him off. "Tell him I'm all ears, but I charge by the minute." Click. He'd hung up faster than a conscience under audit. I looked at Wolfe. They're nervous. Either they think I know too much or too little. "Both are dangerous quantities," he said. I poured myself ginger ale. "Want me to stir the pot again tomorrow?" "Tomorrow," he said. "You will do nothing before 11. The orchids require my presence until then, and I prefer you alive when I return." "Touching," I said. "You do care." I care for efficiency. Your demise would inconvenience me. Same thing. He snorted, a sound somewhere between amusement and indigestion. At 4, Fritz announced that dinner would be delayed an hour because the veal required moral patience. Wolfe accepted this with tragic dignity. He spent the interval dissecting motives aloud while I typed notes. The clack of keys filled the room like small arms fire. My summary read, Delacroix argued over falsified balances Thursday. Vane, coin, Evans present. Vane mentioned Wolfe unprompted. Atmosphere, polished panic. I signed it AG and slid it onto Wolfe's blotter. He read it, nodded once. Acceptable, he said, though your prose lacks modesty. That's what editors are for. He waved a hand. Tomorrow, confer with Saul. Verify the argument's content and whether the private room is equipped with recording devices. Clubs often record meetings under pretense of minutes. Nice habit, I said. Saves them from inventing alibis. When he finally dismissed me, the city outside had gone copper-coloured in the sunset. The brownstone felt unusually quiet, like a courtroom waiting for the verdict. I paused at the door. You think Vane slipped Wolfe's name because he's guilty or just scared? Fear and guilt are siblings, Wolfe said, but only one leaves fingerprints. That was his curtain line. He turned his chair toward the shelves, ending the session. Upstairs, I could hear the elevator starting its slow climb to the orchids. Routine, his way of filing people under to be pondered. I poured myself a glass of milk, strictly within quota, and raised it toward the ceiling. To the Mercury Club, I said softly, may their secrets curdle fast. By 3:30, the brownstone had the personality of a library in bad weather. Rain needled the windows, Wolfe was buried behind a fortress of ledgers, and I was considering whether boredom qualified as a medical condition when the doorbell buzzed like an arrest warrant. Fritz appeared, impeccable as ever. Inspector Kramer, he announced, voice neutral enough to serve in Geneva. I said, show him in before he melts. Kramer entered with his hat dripping and a cigar clenched like evidence. The smell of wet wool and official suspicion came with him. He planted himself on the red chair as though it owed taxes. Wolfe, he growled, your name keeps turning up where corpses do. Care to tell me why Martin Delacroix had your phone number in his wallet? Wolfe didn't look up at first. He finished a sentence in his notebook, capped the pen, and then raised his eyes. Because, Inspector, some men prefer intelligence to chance. Mr. Delacroix evidently sought mine and was too late. Kramer puffed. He was poisoned, cyanide, in the whiskey flask found beside him. You want to claim that's coincidence? Coincidence, Wolfe said, is the alibi of incompetence. I claim nothing, I deduce. That earned a snort. Then deduce this. He flipped open a folder and slid a police photo across the desk. Delacroix's briefcase, or rather, where it should have been. Missing, contents unknown. We think it held brokerage papers. I leaned in. Nice grain on that picture, Inspector. You could frame it for the precinct lobby. Pipe down, Goodwin. Wolfe turned the photo a quarter inch, as if better symmetry might yield confession. The briefcase vanished before your men arrived? According to the bellhop, Delacroix checked in with it at 8. When the body was found, it was gone. Then he entrusted it to someone, Wolfe murmured, or someone relieved him of it before death. Was there a key on his person? No. Room door locked from inside, chain broken when Goodwin muscled in. Kramer shot me a look. Nice work, by the way, tampering with a death scene. Come now, Wolfe said mildly. Mr. Goodwin's intervention merely hastened discovery. You're welcome. Kramer's jaw tightened. I'm not here for your gratitude. I'm here because every time a high-class stiff dies sideways, you two start polishing halos. Wolfe's brows lifted. If morality offends you, Inspector, I can only suggest thicker skin. That brought a grunt that might have been laughter. The tension hung like cigar smoke. Thick, acrid, unwilling to disperse. He said, You knew Delacroix? I knew of him, Wolfe replied. A financier of tepid reputation. Years ago, his firm brushed against a securities syndicate I exposed in testimony before the State Commission. He may have wished to consult me regarding a recurrence. Kramer tapped ash into the tray. You're saying he died trying to warn you? I'm saying, Wolfe corrected, he died trying to defend what honor remained to him. There's a difference between legality and decency. The former is your department. I added, translation, he thinks the man got whacked by manners. Kramer ignored me. We traced phone records. The call to your number was placed at 11:14 p.m. You got there around midnight. Why? I was asleep, Wolfe said smoothly. Mr. Goodwin, however, was awake, as is his vice. His initiative is incurable. Kramer grunted. So Goodwin blundered in, found the corpse, and now the city thinks Wolfe's pulling strings again. I've got reporters outside the precinct yelling that you're on the case. Then muzzle them, Wolfe said. Sensationalism contaminates evidence. I can't muzzle the press, Kramer barked. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, the motion carrying more weight than most men's shouts. Then give them truth. Announce that the police are pursuing a theft associated with a broker's death. Omit my name. The public's appetite for scandal need not dine on me. Kramer studied him, smoke wreathing the lines of his face. You offering cooperation? Conditional. I'll forward any findings relevant to the missing briefcase, provided you restrain your hounds from barking at my door. I said, if détente ever needs a model, I'll rent you two. Neither looked impressed. Kramer rose, planting both fists on the desk. Fine. You get me something solid, I'll hold the story till noon editions. After that, all bets are off. Agreed, Wolfe said. In return, you will share the laboratory analysis of the flask residue. Kramer hesitated, then nodded once. Cyanide crystals, small dose dissolved in rye, no prints. Whoever handled it wore gloves, or brains. Brains are rarer, Wolfe murmured. Tell your men to trace the source of the flask's engraving. Such items are often monogrammed for club use. Kramer frowned. Club? The Mercury Club, I put in. Our victim's lunch spot of choice. And mine this week. Kramer's eyebrows climbed. You've already been there? Professional curiosity, I said. He sighed through his nose. You two'll drive me to ulcers. Your constitution is admirable, Wolfe said. It withstands both law and logic. That one almost earned a smile. Almost. Kramer stubbed his cigar, leaving a crater of ash like punctuation on our verbal treaty. Wolfe, he said finally, I don't like your methods, but I trust your motives more than most civilians. If you're right about this syndicate angle, the DA will want it tidy. Don't grandstand me. I never perform, Wolfe replied. I merely conclude. Kramer turned to leave, hat in hand. At the door he paused. You ever think of joining the force? Wolfe's eyes half closed. Only when I despair of civilization. Kramer grunted approval and went out, trailing damp footprints and unspoken respect. The door clicked behind him. For a long moment the rain was the only sound. Then Wolfe exhaled, a deep, measured release, as though expelling the precinct's entire bureaucracy. Archie, he said, note that Inspector Kramer's patience, though admirable, is finite. We must supply him results before exhaustion or headlines undo him. Sure, I said. I'll just fetch the missing briefcase, expose a syndicate, and be back before dinner. Do so, he murmured. Fritz will hold the soup. I couldn't help laughing. You know, one day your faith in me will ruin your digestion. Unlikely, he said. My digestion is indestructible. Yours, however, depends on wit. Use it. He reached for the bell cord. Fritz reappeared as if materialized by Latin incantation, bearing a tray with hot coffee and Wolfe's afternoon beer chilling beside it. The ritual was perfect. The tension dissolved into steam. Wolfe lifted the cup. To Inspector Kramer, he said, may duty never eclipse reason. I raised my glass of soda, and may reason occasionally by lunch. The rain kept tapping the windows, polite but insistent, like the world reminding us it wasn't through with murder yet. By the time the city dried out from the rain, Saul Panzer and I were already knee-deep in its mud. Wolfe had spent breakfast informing me that Kramer's truce would not survive without sustenance, which translated into, find the missing briefcase before the police find another reason to darken my door. Saul met me at a corner luncheonette on 54th, the kind that served its coffee like punishment. His cap was pulled low, his face unreadable as an audit report. Courier named Marty Dell, he said over a chipped mug, small-time runner for the brokerage crowd, used to ferry papers between Delacroix's firm and the Mercury Club. Used to. Because as of an hour ago, Saul said, he's deceased. Found in a taxi near Bryant Park. Poison. Same brand. I left a dime for the coffee, which was overpaying, and we headed for the morgue. The cabbie who'd found him looked ready to trade in his license for a prayer book. Guy was sitting quiet, like he'd fallen asleep. Then I noticed he wasn't breathing. The detective on site, Stebbins, greeted me with his usual poetry. "Oh, hell, not you again." "Good to see you too, Pearlie," I said. "How's the homicide racket?" He grunted. "You and Wolfe keep making it lively." Dell's body lay slumped against the cab seat, mouth open in a silent complaint. The coroner bagged his flask, another rye bottle, another whiff of almonds. The man could have at least varied the menu. "Anything on him?" I asked. Stebbins handed over a clear envelope. Inside sat a crumpled claim ticket from the Midtown National Bank, box 418. "That's all. No wallet, no cash." Saul nodded toward it. "Looks like he was running the same cargo Delacroix lost." We followed the paper trail to Midtown National. The manager, a prune in a pinstripe, met us in the vault corridor where the air smelled of metal and secrecy. He checked the register. "Box 418 was accessed this morning, 10:30. Key presented by the authorized holder, Mr. Marty Dell." "Alone?" I asked. "According to the guard." "Then the guard's due for an eye exam," I muttered. With Stebbins's reluctant cooperation and Kramer's phone authorization, we opened 418. The lid creaked like a guilty conscience. Empty, except for a single curl of grey cigar ash. I stared at it. Not just any ash. Dark, oily, fine cut. The kind that falls from an imported Maduro No. 4. Wolfe's favourite. I let out a low whistle. I don't usually lend Wolfe's brand of cigars to strangers, but somebody took initiative. Stebbins squinted. "You saying your boss was here?" "I'm saying," I replied, "if he was, the vault would be alphabetized and the guard unemployed." He scowled but bagged the ash anyway. "Kramer'll love this." Back at the brownstone, the afternoon light had gone sullen. Wolfe sat behind his desk, a monument of calm surrounded by paper carnage, financial reports, letters, and one unopened telegram. Fritz had just brought in beer. The glass sweated like it knew trouble. "Report," Wolfe said. "Briefcase led us to a corpse named Marty Dell," I began. "Same poison. His only souvenir was a bank ticket. We opened the box. Empty, unless you count your cigar ash." His eyelids rose. "My ash?" "Imported Maduro No. 4. Unless your brands suddenly become democratic, someone's framing you." Wolfe's face didn't change, but the room lost 10 degrees. Phooey. The sound came out soft but lethal. The stupidity of villainy is its only constant. He reached for his beer, took a measured sip, and set it down untouched thereafter. Described the condition of the box. "Unforced lock. Guard swears Dell entered alone." "Impossible," Wolfe said. "The man was already dying if the poison's timing matches Delacroix's. He could not both administer and deposit." "So he had help," I said, "or supervision." "Indeed. The ash was planted to implicate me. They wished to suggest collusion between the deceased and myself, likely to discredit whatever truth Delacroix meant to deliver." I leaned back. "You're famous, boss. Takes work to get framed this stylishly." He cut me a look that would have soured champagne. "This is intolerable. Kramer will seize the opportunity to parade suspicion through the press. Our response must preempt him." I tapped the desk. "Want me to leak a different story to Lon Cohen?" Wolfe shook his head. "Not yet. Facts first. Manipulation later." Fritz reappeared, hovering politely. "Dinner, Herr Wolfe?" "Postponed," Wolfe said. "The world insists on indigestion." Fritz retreated without offence. The phone rang. I answered. "Wolfe and Goodwin, Emotional Rescue Division." Kramer's voice erupted like gravel in a blender. "Goodwin! You were at that vault." "News travels fast." "So does suspicion," he barked. "You find a box, you open it, and what do we get? Your boss's cigar ash. Explain that." Wolfe gestured for the receiver. I passed it over. "Inspector," he said evenly, "the ash was placed there by design. A child could discern that." "Maybe," Kramer said, "but the press won't be that bright. They already think you're coaching stockbrokers to their graves." "Then halt their stupidity," Wolfe replied. "Release no statement until I submit my findings." "You think I take orders from you?" "I think," Wolfe said, "you prefer accuracy to embarrassment." There was a long pause filled only by Kramer's smoke crackle. Then, "You got 24 hours, Wolfe. After that, I go public." Agreed. Wolfe replaced the receiver like a judge shelving a verdict. He turned to me. Archie, compose a memorandum for the record. Title it Perjuries of Appearance. Note the deliberate planting of evidence, its impracticality, and its intent to compromise me. Got it. I rolled the paper into the typewriter. The keys clacked their nervous rhythm. He began pacing, an event rarer than comets. Someone with access to my habits orchestrates this. Only a limited circle knows my predilection for Maduros. Could be coincidence, I offered. A lot of rich men smoke your brand. He spun toward me. Coincidence? You insult logic. I try, he exhaled. Forgive me, Archie. Irritation misdirected is ungracious. I am annoyed. That's putting it delicately. He resumed his seat, eyes closed, fingertips pressed together. The orchids upstairs were missing their master, but I doubted even they could calm him. After a while he spoke again, low and precise. They intend to isolate us, compel Kramer to act against me, thereby discrediting any later disclosure. The briefcase, the deposit, the ash, all components of a narrative wherein Nero Wolfe appears both accomplice and conspirator. Nice setup, I said. All they need is a confession in triplicate, which they shall not have. Therefore, Mr. Goodwin, tomorrow you will discover the origin of that flask series and the manufacturer of the cigars planted. Facts must precede inference. I nodded. And if Kramer's boys shadow me? I shall speak with him directly. He may bark, but he will not bite you. I forbid it. The protectiveness came through the way Wolfe did everything, buried under formality but solid as granite. Thanks, I said. I'd hate to bleed on Fritz's rug. That earned a thin smile. You are flippant but competent. Now go. At 6, the elevator cables began their slow chant. He was heading to the orchids, his ritual refuge. I finished the memo, stacked it on his blotter, and listened to the brownstones settle into silence. Outside, the city hummed its usual corruption lullaby. A taxi backfired down the block, sounding too much like a gunshot. Somewhere someone was rewriting facts in fresh ink, and we were the footnotes. I looked at the note I'd typed last. Truth as manipulated evidence. Fitting enough to frame. Then I flipped off the office light and muttered to the empty room, if truth's for sale, we'd better start bidding high. At 5:30, Manhattan looked as though somebody had polished it for company. The sunset caught every window in the skyline and turned the glass into small, expensive lies. I was heading for one of those lies, a steel and chrome beehive on East 51st where Talbot Vane kept his secretary, his secrets, and, if rumour was honest for once, a ledger worth more than his conscience. I checked in at the lobby desk under my favourite alias, Anthony George, independent auditor. The guard gave me the kind of once-over that says he's seen too many men in the auditing business with better suits. I rode the elevator up to the 19th floor, where the corridors had mirrors instead of morals. The name on the frosted glass read Talbot Vane and Associates, private. The decor suggested that honesty was welcome but had to make an appointment. Irene Talbot opened the door herself. She wasn't beautiful in the calendar girl sense. She was the kind that made you wonder what she was hiding behind her neatness. Slim, dark hair pinned like it had been disciplined by fear, and eyes that kept checking the reflections in every shiny surface. The room around her was all glass and metal, a fish tank for high-class anxiety. "You're Mr. Goodwin?" she asked. The voice was low, careful, like she was trying not to wake the ghosts in the filing cabinets. "That's right. Nero Wolfe's office. We're not in the business of haunting secretaries, Miss Talbot, so relax. I just need a few answers about your boss's late dinner companion, Mr. Delacroix." Her fingers tightened around a silver pencil. "I can't help you. Mr. Vane said—" "Sure, Mr. Vane says a lot. But I'm betting he didn't tell you to catch bullets for him, which, from the way this case is shaping up, is a real possibility." That got a flinch. "Please, don't joke." "I wasn't," I said. "I only charge for jokes when they're good." She tried to meet my eyes and failed halfway. "I shouldn't even be talking to you. They said the police are polite men who don't pay retainers," I finished. "Let's keep this between the living, Miss Talbot. You knew Delacroix. He argued with Vane 2 nights before he was poisoned. About what?" She moved toward the big window that looked over the city. Her reflection was a ghost among skyscrapers. He said there were false entries in the accounts, that someone was laundering money through dummy trades. He had proof, figures, dates, initials. He said he'd put it somewhere safe. Safe like a safety deposit box? I asked. Her head turned sharply. How do you... Lucky guess. The courier's dead too. Same poison. Maybe he moved the papers for your boss. She sank into the chrome chair behind the desk. Marty Dell, she murmured. I told him not to take it. Take what? Her hesitation lasted just long enough to look like guilt. Then she reached into a drawer, produced a flat brown envelope and set it on the glass top without opening it. The ledger. Mr. Vane ordered it destroyed. I couldn't. I whistled softly. You have an admirable sense of preservation. Let me guess, because destroying it might make you next on the list? She gave a quick, humorless smile. Something like that. I opened the envelope carefully. The ledger was handwritten, tidy columns of numbers and coded initials. On the third page, one set repeated like a drumbeat, H.M. I said, I know a man with those initials, Howard Merrill. He runs political fundraisers and occasionally the city. You want to tell me why his name's tied to payments from Delacroix's firm? Her hand went to her throat. I don't know. Mr. Vane said they were consulting fees. But the amounts... She stopped, eyes flicking to the glass wall again. I followed her glance. Nothing there but our reflections and the burning skyline. Still, the hair on my neck took notice. Relax, I said. If anyone's eavesdropping, they'll at least get bored before I finish my notes. She managed a laugh. You don't frighten easily, do you, Mr. Goodwin? Only of running out of coffee, I said. Now, about those initials. The sentence ended in the crack of glass. The window exploded inward with a neat, sharp pop. I hit the floor before my brain finished the thought, pulling her down with me. A second later, a bullet buried itself in the far wall. The office filled with glittering dust and the smell of cordite. When I looked at her, there was a thin red line across her shoulder where the glass had kissed her. You all right? She nodded, eyes wide but steady. Yes, I think so. Good, because I'd planned on dinner, not target practice. Outside, tires screamed down the avenue. Whoever had fired was long gone by the time I reached the window frame. The hole in the glass pointed toward the alley opposite, a perfect angle for a quick shot from a moving car. I called downstairs for the building guard, then phoned the precinct. Within 15 minutes, Stebbins arrived with 2 uniforms and enough sarcasm to fumigate the place. Well, well, he said. You again. You sure the city can afford your kind of excitement? Put it on my expense sheet, I told him. 1 broken window, 1 Gray's secretary, 1 attempted frame-up. He grunted, sent the uniforms to canvass the street, and took my statement while staring suspiciously at the envelope on the desk. I didn't hand it over. Wolfe's rule number 6, never surrender original evidence to the prematurely curious. Instead, I made a photostat at the corner shop and gave Pearlie the copy. The original went into my briefcase under moral lock and physical key. By the time the police cleared out, dusk had melted into neon. I poured Irene a drink from the office cabinet, bourbon, unpoisoned by inspection. You should go home, I said, and not by the same route twice. She looked pale but composed. What about the ledger? I'll take care of it. You've done enough heroics for one day. She hesitated, then put her hand lightly on my arm. Mr. Goodwin, be careful, they won't stop now. Lady, I said, I'm always careful. That's why I'm still drawing breath and sarcasm. She tried to smile, failed, and left with the faintest scent of perfume and fear. I waited until the elevator doors closed before heading out myself. It was nearly 7 when I got back to the brownstone. The office was a pool of lamplight. Wolfe sat in his chair reading the Gazette with the solemnity of a judge awaiting confession. Fritz's cart stood ready with the dinner service, but nothing had been touched. He looked up as I came in. You are late. I was busy dodging lead. I dropped the briefcase on his desk and opened it to show the ledger. Miss Talbot handed over photostats, selected pages from her files before the shooting started. Wolfe's nostrils flared. Shooting? 1 bullet, 1 window, 1 new ventilation system. She's scratched, not dead, he scowled. Confound it, Archie. I told you to exercise prudence, not acrobatics. Hey, I didn't invite the gunman. Some people just can't take paperwork. He took the pages gingerly as if they might explode again, and scanned the columns. When he reached the HM entries, his mouth compressed into a single syllable of thought. HM, Howard Merrill, of course, the political underwriter. Winner of the Most Likely to Commit Perjury award, I said. Delacroix found him siphoning through dummy accounts. Wolfe nodded slowly. This corroborates the widow's implication of corruption, though the evidence is incomplete. A ledger alone proves nothing without testimony. Well, the testimony almost got perforated, I said. Somebody wants silence more than innocence. He closed the book, fingers tapping the cover in measured irritation. Your recklessness nearly cost us our only living witness. You will stay within civilized range henceforth. Sure, I said, right after I finish dodging civilization. Phooey, he tugged the bell cord. Fritz appeared with the timing of a stage cue. 2 trays, Fritz, Wolfe said. Our Mr. Goodwin has apparently dined on adrenaline. Fritz inclined his head and departed. Wolfe regarded me a moment longer. I disapprove of your methods, he said, but I am gratified you remain functional. Next time, use discretion before gallantry. Discretion's your department, I said. Gallantry just keeps me employed. Impertinence keeps you tolerated, he corrected. I grinned. Same paycheck. He opened the ledger again, his eyes already moving past irritation into analysis. The pattern of entries suggests coordination among at least 3 accounts. Tomorrow we shall verify whether Merrill's firm corresponds to the numbers. You will consult Mr. Pantzer for corroborating data. Gladly, I said, as long as no one's shooting. See that they do not, he said. I have grown fond of having you intact. You are, regrettably, irreplaceable. Coming from Wolfe, that was enough to earn a footnote in the sentimental archives. I poured myself a ginger ale and leaned against the desk. Fritz returned with 2 plates, veal with white wine sauce, and Wolfe motioned me to sit. Dinner under the smell of danger had a peculiar taste, but Fritz's cooking was an antidote to mortality. Wolfe lifted his glass. To Miss Talbot, he said, may courage and stupidity never coincide again. I clinked mine against his. I'll drink to that, and maybe buy new insurance tomorrow. The brownstone settled into its comfortable rhythm. Forks, quiet, and the rain's faint resumption outside. Upstairs the orchids would be waiting, patient as truth. Wolfe would go to them soon. I'd type my notes before bed. For now the world had stopped shooting long enough for veal. Still, as I looked at the closed ledger on the desk, I knew the calm wouldn't last. Reflections can lie, but bullets don't. By 8 o'clock the city had wrung itself dry. The rain left the streets shining like bad intentions scrubbed clean, and the brownstone smelled faintly of damp earth and orchids. Fritz was clearing the dinner things. Dinner was veal. Later, it was veal again, because Wolfe swore variety was the refuge of mediocrity, when the doorbell sounded with a persistence that suggested either urgency or idiocy. I opened it to find Saul Pantzer, trench coat beading rain, eyes calm as arithmetic. Delivery, he said. From inside his coat he produced a sealed manila envelope. Collect or COD? I asked. Neither. Miss Irene Talbot. Said to tell Wolfe this clears her conscience, if not her schedule. He handed it over and departed without ceremony. Saul's idea of conversation was silence with punctuation. I carried the envelope to the office, where Wolfe was half reclined, digesting both dinner and civilization. The orchid's scent drifted faintly from the elevator shaft upstairs. His mood usually improved in proportion. A messenger, not a client, I said, laying the envelope on his desk. Open it, he directed. Inside lay a bound ledger copy, neatly imitated handwriting, same smell of expensive deceit. Wolfe adjusted his spectacles and began reading, one finger marking the columns. The lamplight caught the edge of his beer glass, turning it into a small amber halo. When Wolfe studies, the world stops breathing. After 10 minutes he spoke. H.M., Howard Merrill, repeated across 3 accounts, as we suspected. I leaned on the desk. Political sugar daddy of the Mercury Club. Delacroix must have been ready to blow the whistle. Indeed. Yet something jars. He tapped the margin with the pen. Observe this entry, April 14th. I frowned. That's 3 days after Delacroix died. Precisely. The dead are seldom punctual bookkeepers. He turned another page. More. Entries extending through April 20th. Impossible. Ergo, the document is false. I whistled. I love paperwork that lies. It saves suspects the trouble. Wolfe's mouth twitched, the closest thing to amusement permitted outside orchid hours. This fabrication is cunning. Whoever prepared it possessed both access and intellect enough to mimic Delacroix's hand, but not his mortality. So somebody forged it to shove Merrill under the bus. Phooey, to divert the bus entirely. He leaned back, eyes half closed. The earlier ledger, the shooting, the ash, all part of an orchestrated misdirection. The architect wishes us to fixate upon Merrill while he proceeds unobserved. Meaning vain. Meaning, he said slowly, whoever profits from Merrill's ruin. Vain is an obvious candidate, therefore possibly innocent. I grinned. You're getting soft, boss. Next you'll tell me Kramer writes poetry. He ignored that. Have you examined the ink? Only the spelling. The ink differs subtly between pages, some newer, glossier, fresh additions to old deceit. He closed the ledger and regarded it as if it had personally insulted him. A forgery compounded. Whoever arranged this anticipated scrutiny. I said, then we're dancing to somebody else's tune. He looked up sharply. No, Archie, we shall compose our own. Tomorrow you will visit Merrill's office, not to accuse, but to observe. The forged ledger will serve as bait. Bait tends to attract teeth. Teeth are useful. They reveal what bites. That was Wolfe at his most affectionate. When he handed you the job most likely to end in assault, it meant trust. I picked up the ledger. So I walk in waving this, and if Merrill shoots me, we'll know he's innocent. Wolfe's eyelids lowered. Your levity conceals acuity. You discern risk, yet proceed, a commendable idiocy. Coming from you, that's practically a valentine. He actually smiled, a small, rare curvature. You are, Mr. Goodwin, an indispensable fool. Thanks. I'll embroider that on a pillow. He gestured toward the notepad. Take dictation. A memorandum for Inspector Kramer. The document received tonight is counterfeit. Analysis confirms post-mortem entries. Withhold dissemination pending verification. We shall not permit the press to crown another false saviour. I typed it out, the keys clacking like rains after echo. Wolfe listened to the rhythm, eyes half closed, until I finished. He signed the page with his fountain pen, folded it, and sealed it in an envelope. Fritz will deliver this at 9 tomorrow. I prefer Kramer to hear it from me before rumour hears it from Merrill. I said, think he'll appreciate the courtesy? He will resent it, Wolfe said, which is proof of its necessity. I slipped the forged ledger into the safe and locked it. Well, that's one less lie cluttering the desk. Lies are seldom clutter, he murmured. They are architecture, the facades behind which truth shelters. Poetic for a man who thinks rhyme's a waste of logic. He raised a brow. Poetry and deduction share ancestry. Both impose order upon chaos. One merely charges admission. I poured myself ginger ale and watched him. The lamplight softened the lines around his eyes. The giant was tired, but far from defeated. Upstairs, the orchids waited in their humid heaven, but he stayed at his desk, unwilling to retreat while falsehood strutted unchallenged. Boss, I said, if the ledger's fake, that means Irene risked her neck for nothing. Not nothing, Wolfe replied. For revelation. She exposed the mechanism by which deceit travels. It is useful knowledge. Maybe, I said, but it won't look good on her obituary. He gave me a long, unreadable look. You are fond of her. I'm fond of anyone who bleeds instead of lies. Then ensure she does neither again. He gestured toward the safe. You will keep that ledger as one keeps a venomous specimen, contained. Got it. Fritz re-entered quietly with Wolfe's evening coffee. The aroma filled the room, smoothing out the last rough edges of tension. Wolfe accepted the cup, took one slow sip, and set it down precisely on the blotter. Archie, he said, voice softer, your intuition served us. You noted the implausible dates before I voiced them. It merits acknowledgement. Well, I said, I try to keep up with the help. Phooey, you surpass it. When this affair concludes, remind me to double your bonus. I nearly dropped the ginger ale. Now there's a headline. Wolfe opens wallet voluntarily. He closed his eyes. Do not provoke me into retracting. The rain outside had stopped for good. Even the city seemed to hold its breath. I turned off the typewriter, stacked the papers and leaned back. The office smelled of orchids, coffee and expensive fraud. Tomorrow we'd tackle the man behind the ledger, but for the moment, peace had the floor. Wolfe reached for the bell cord, a sign the world could spin without us for a while. "Good night, Archie." "Night, sir," I said. "Dream of honest accountants." He snorted faintly, which from Wolfe counted as laughter, and I left him with the orchids drifting down from above like the truth, fragile, cultivated, and almost believable. By 9:30 the brownstone sounded like a press room in a windstorm. Phones were ringing, the doorbell had developed a nervous tick, and somewhere outside a photographer was trying to turn our stoop into a crime exhibit. I was at my desk taking messages I had no intention of delivering when Fritz appeared with a tray balanced like he was crossing no man's land. 2 coffees, 1 plate of buttered toast, and the Morning Gazette folded with surgical neatness. "Delivering supplies to the besieged," I said. He sniffed. "If they start throwing tomatoes, I resign." "Don't worry, Fritz, they can't afford fresh produce." Wolfe took the paper without comment, but the moment he saw the headline, the air grew 10 degrees colder. "Wolfe shielding broker ring, police probe stalled." The subhead was worse: "Exclusive ledger evidence links famous detective to political cover-up." I said, "Congratulations, boss. You've gone from recluse to racket in 1 edition." He lowered the paper slowly. "Mr. Cohen's penchant for melodrama exceeds his discretion." "That's what sells papers," I said. "Murders passé, character assassinations the modern trend." Before Wolfe could answer, the doorbell gave its death rattle again. I opened the door and found Inspector Kramer framed in cigar smoke and indignation. He shoved the paper at me. "You see this? You see what my phone's doing? You're a headline, Wolfe, and I'm the punctuation mark." "Good morning, Inspector," Wolfe said evenly. "Do come in before hysteria leaks through the doorway." Kramer stomped inside, hat dripping, jaw set for combat. "You got yourself a circus out there. Half the press thinks you're running Merrill's protection detail, and the other half wants me to arrest you for treason." "Both halves," Wolfe murmured. "Are halves too many?" Kramer planted himself by the desk. "This came from somewhere, Wolfe. Somebody leaked that ledger. And since you've been sitting on it, I need to know if you're the somebody." I said, "We don't leak, Inspector. We simmer, occasionally boil, never leak." "Shut up, Goodwin." "Delighted." Wolfe ignored the exchange, scanning the paper again. "Observe, Archie," he said, pointing to the front-page photograph. "The ledger reproduced here. Note the orientation of the text." I leaned over. "Backwards. The photo's flipped." "Indeed. A minor compositor's error, perhaps, but also revealing. The reflection visible in the photo's background suggests glass paneling and ornate shelving." Kramer frowned. "So?" "So," Wolfe said, "the photograph was not taken in a police facility or this office. It was staged inside the Mercury Club library. I recognized the architecture. The backward type and that glass shelving pattern matched the club's library wall. I've dined there twice in years past." "That's a nice trick for a man who never leaves home," I said. He shot me a glance. "Exceptional cuisine justifies exceptional exertion." Kramer jabbed the paper with his cigar. "You telling me the DA's office sent a photographer into the Mercury Club to fake evidence?" "I am telling you," Wolfe replied, "that whoever controls the narrative intends to place us precisely where the truth is not. The reversal of the image mirrors the reversal of fact." "That's poetic," I said. "If I'd known falsification could be decorative, I'd have gone into journalism." Kramer paced the rug, chewing smoke. "I talked to the DA's secretary this morning. They swear the leak didn't come from them, but I know better. The timing's too neat. Somebody inside wanted you roasted before you could open your mouth." "Understandable," Wolfe said. "I dislike suspense myself." Kramer grunted. "This puts me in a spot, Wolfe. Public's howling for blood, the commissioner's muttering warrants, and I'm supposed to look like I can tell my left hand from propaganda." "You can," Wolfe said. "You merely require assistance with direction." "Meaning?" "Meaning," Wolfe said. "You will issue no statement until we identify who staged that photograph. You will also, I suggest, instruct your press officer to deny any official connection to this absurd headline." Kramer folded his arms. "And what do I get in return?" "The truth," Wolfe said. "I'm not in the habit of deceiving law enforcement, only correcting it." I said, If friendship's what this is, I'll keep my enemies. Quiet, Archie. Yes, sir. Kramer snorted, but the edge of his anger had dulled. He dragged a chair forward, sat, and stabbed the cigar into the ashtray. All right, genius. You think the photo came from the Mercury Club? What's your play? Wolfe interlaced his fingers. Someone there, most likely Vane or an associate, possesses both motive and access. The forged ledger we received last night served as prop for this very image. The forger sought to lend it authenticity through publicity. So they planted it, Kramer said slowly, and the DA's office swallowed the bait. Precisely. He shook his head. I'll be damned. I thought you were making smoke to protect your hide. Turns out you're cleaning mine. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. I accept gratitude in silence, Inspector. Words would only bruise your throat. For once, Kramer almost smiled. Don't push your luck. You still look guilty in print. Then print must apologize to logic, Wolfe said. Archie, take down a memorandum for Lon Cohen. I rolled a fresh sheet into the typewriter. Dictate, he said. Sir, your headline of this morning constitutes an egregious misrepresentation. The photograph accompanying it depicts a counterfeit ledger staged at the Mercury Club. I advise immediate retraction before libel becomes contagious. I typed it clean, fast, and passed it across for signature. Wolfe scrawled his name like a death warrant. Kramer rose. You sending that to Cohen? Special messenger, Wolfe said. The truth should travel first class. Kramer jammed his hat on. All right, Wolfe. I'll talk to the commissioner, hold off the warrant, and dig into the DA's leak. But if this blows up, I'm hanging you in the press room. Your gallantry is appreciated, Wolfe murmured. He paused at the door. For the record, you were right about the ledger. Our lab says half the entries were made with ink dated days after Delacroix's death. Wolfe inclined his head. I rarely enjoy being right, Inspector. It burdens conversation. Yeah, Kramer said, but it keeps me employed. He left without slamming the door, high praise in his language. Silence settled. Outside, reporters still barked questions through the drizzle. Fritz re-entered with a fresh pot of coffee and an expression that suggested moral injury from newspaper ink. More supplies, Fritz? I asked. For the wounded, he said gravely, pouring. Wolfe accepted his cup, inhaled the steam and leaned back. Archie, when ignorance becomes fashionable, truth must dress for ridicule. Nice line, I said. You saving it for your memoirs? For my obituary, perhaps. Let's postpone that edition, I said. At this rate, even the orchids will need press agents. He sighed, lifted the cup, and toasted the room. To endurance. Make mine double, I said, and turned the Gazette face down. If the world wanted to believe Nero Wolfe was the villain, it could buy its own copy. We had better stories to write. By nightfall, we'd wired the room and set the bait. All that remained was patience. At 11:30, the Mercury Club looked like a tomb that tipped well. The chandeliers had been dimmed to a polite shimmer, the carpets drank the footsteps, and every chair had the attitude of an alibi. The waiter who let me in took one look at the envelope in my hand, the one with Wolfe's embossed letterhead, and decided I was either important or contagious. I told him I'd handle my own service and watched him vanish with the speed of a good employee who doesn't want overtime. Saul Pantzer was already there, invisible in a corner booth. His hat brim shadowed the small recorder he'd wired beneath the table, a new toy he'd picked up from a radio engineer friend, the kind that hissed more than it hummed but got the job done. He gave me a nod that meant everything's live. I straightened my tie and took my seat where the lighting would make me look respectable and, hopefully, unarmed. The club clock clicked to midnight. Outside, Fifth Avenue yawned in the drizzle. Inside, the air smelled of liquor, brass polish, and fear in a tuxedo. Wolfe was 3 miles uptown, wearing his headphones like a judge's wig, listening through the wire Saul had rigged to the club's phone line. We'd tested it twice that afternoon, clear enough to hear a heartbeat or a lie. Wolfe's last words before I left had been calm as a hanging. Archie, complete the confession before Kramer intervenes. I will decide when to strike. The first to arrive was Richard Coyne, stocky, florid, and nervous in a way money can't fix. He carried a briefcase that might have held bonds or excuses. "Evening, Goodwin," he said, voice too hearty. "Strange hour for bookkeeping." Truth keeps late hours, I told him. Sit down. The party's exclusive. Talbot Vane followed 5 minutes later, coat collar up, eyes like polished granite. He gave me a look that could have frozen coffee. If this is extortion, I warn you. Relax, I said. It's a reunion. You'll love the guest list. He noticed the third-place setting and frowned. Who else? Howard Merrill. He's bringing dessert, humble pie. That name knocked some of the starch out of him. He poured himself a brandy without asking. When Merrill finally entered, he didn't bother with pretense. The man carried confidence the way some men carry sidearms, visible, heavy, and probably loaded. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the smooth voice of a campaign donor who never lost an election. Gentlemen, he said, I was told this meeting was confidential. Mr. Goodwin, you represent Nero Wolfe. I represent whoever pays the phone bill, I said. And tonight that's Wolfe. He likes truth on the rocks, no chaser. He smiled faintly and sat. You're audacious, I'll give you that. But you're meddling in matters of national interest. Vane snorted. National interest? That's a fine name for larceny. Careful, Merrill said, or I'll forget our arrangement. That word, arrangement, hung in the room like cheap perfume. I leaned back, letting the tape spool. Let's call it what it is, boys. Delacroix was going to expose a fake securities pool. You panicked. One of you hired poison. I'm just here to hear which. Coyne swallowed. We didn't kill him. He was ill. Merrill's eyes flicked toward him, sharp as glass. You talk too much, Dick. Yeah, I said, but not enough to stay alive. So which one of you mixed the cocktail? Vane stood abruptly. This is absurd. I'm leaving. Sit down, Merrill said quietly, authority in 3 syllables. Vane sat. Merrill folded his hands. You want truth, Goodwin? Here's some. Delacroix was loyal, to a fault, but he lacked perspective. Our nation's economy is war-torn. Stabilization requires flexibility. He found discrepancies in our fund transfers, temporary reallocations. He threatened to go public. I tried reason, then incentive. He refused both. So I protected the greater good. You mean yourself, I said. I mean the markets, he replied smoothly. The man's hysteria would have ruined hundreds of investors. By poisoning him? He hesitated, the fatal kind of pause that screams truth. I didn't administer it. I merely arranged containment. Containment's a nice euphemism for murder, I said. Who supplied the cyanide? His gaze slid to Vane, who'd gone pale as credit paper. He did. Vane shot to his feet again. You liar! You begged me for it. You said Delacroix was going to the SEC, that he'd destroy us all. I gave you the vial to scare him, not kill him. Scare him? Merrill's laugh was dry. You think a man gasping for breath is frightened? He's finished. That did it. The club's chandelier quivered from the vibrations of 3 egos colliding. I made sure to keep my hands flat on the table. Gentlemen, I said, if this were poker, you'd both just showed aces and arsenic. Coyne bolted halfway up. I'm not part of this. I handled paperwork. Sit, Merrill snapped. He turned back to me. You've got what you came for. Now erase it. I would, I said, but I'm out of erasers, and the microphone doesn't take dictation. He blinked, realizing. The calm peeled off his face like paint under acid. You recorded? That's right. Smile for posterity. Vane lunged for the table, eyes wild. Saul Panzer moved faster. He came out of the shadows like a closing door and pressed a cold piece of logic against Vane's wrist. The little revolver clattered to the floor. Enough, Saul said quietly. The tape's got every word. For a second, silence. Only the faint tick of the clock and the sound of Merrill's composure bleeding out. He straightened, adjusting his cufflinks. You'll regret this, Goodwin. There are forces bigger than your employer. Sure, I said. Gravity, taxation, and homicide statutes. He started for the door, but it swung open before he reached it. 2 plainclothes cops stepped in, hats low, eyes colder than coffee at dawn. Behind them came Inspector Kramer, cigar blazing victory smoke. Evening, gentlemen, he said. Heard you were holding a midnight seminar on market ethics. Merrill turned scarlet. This is entrapment. Call it education, Kramer said. Lesson 1, don't confess into a microphone. Saul clicked the recorder off and handed it over. All yours, Inspector. Kramer took it, grinning like a man who'd just found promotion in a tin can. Music to my ears. Goodwin, remind me to send Wolfe a thank you card. Maybe a quieter case next time. I'll frame it, I said. He likes tokens of affection. The cops led Merrill and Vane out. Merrill stiff with outrage, Vane slumped with relief. Coyne followed, mumbling about lawyers. When the door closed, the club felt empty again, except for the chandelier still trembling from adrenaline. Saul began packing up the wires. You all right? He asked. Never better, I said. If I'd known patriotism paid this well, I'd have joined the Treasury. He smirked, his version of a belly laugh, and left to deliver the gear to Wolfe. Back at the brownstone, the hour was 1:15. The orchids were asleep, but Wolfe wasn't. He sat at his desk with the headphones still draped around his neck, a look of supreme satisfaction mixed with weariness, the kind of face emperors wear after conquering paperwork. You allowed the confession to complete, he said, as if announcing sunrise. You told me to, I said. They sang the whole libretto. Merrill did the aria, Vane supplied harmony. Excellent. Kramer's men arrived precisely on schedule. Yeah, he made quite an entrance. You two ought to go on the road. Wolfe's mouth curved faintly. The stage is large enough here. I dropped into my chair. Well, it's over. Merrill's cooked, Vane's half-baked, and Coyne's toast. Poetic, Wolfe murmured. Fritz will appreciate the culinary imagery. I'm hungry enough to appreciate Fritz himself. Any chance of a late sandwich? He tugged the bell cord. Fritz. The Swiss miracle appeared almost instantly, as though teleported by appetite. Yes, Herr Wolfe. Cold chicken for Mr. Goodwin, beer for me. Immediately. When Fritz left, Wolfe turned to me, expression softening. You performed admirably. Your discretion under pressure justified my trust. High praise, I said. If you keep that up, I'll start expecting weekends off. Do not abuse good fortune, he warned, but the corner of his mouth betrayed him. I leaned back, stretching. You know, boss, every patriot's dream is to die solvent. Merrill just did it the hard way. Wolfe sighed, folding his hands. Greed often masquerades as devotion to country. It's a costume easily worn, poorly removed. That's philosophy. You sure you don't want to take it up full time? Never, he said. It doesn't pay. Fritz returned with the tray. Wolfe lifted his chilled glass. I took the sandwich. Outside, the drizzle had stopped, leaving the night clean and oddly innocent. The city was between sins for once. Wolfe raised his glass. To fidelity in service of reason, I grinned, and to clients who pay in advance. He almost smiled again. The orchid scent drifted faintly down from upstairs, blending with the malt and the silence. Wolfe drank, I chewed, and Manhattan exhaled. The case was done, the confession captured, and somewhere in a newsroom the next headline was already printing lies we hadn't yet lived. For tonight, that was someone else's problem. The brownstone looks its best when the world outside is ugly. That night Manhattan was dripping and irritable, horns blaring at puddles, while inside the office the fire threw gold onto Wolfe's desk and turned his beer glass into a cathedral window. Fritz had drawn the curtains, lit the hearth, and vanished to safer ground. You could feel the weight of the room, the smell of books and orchids, the sense that truth was on the menu and somebody was about to choke on it. I'd arranged the chairs exactly the way Wolfe liked, symmetry and discomfort combined. The visitors were due at 8. Wolfe had decreed it as the hour of reckoning, which sounded biblical and probably would be. The doorbell started the overture at 7:58. Kramer came first, shoulders hunched against the drizzle, cigar clamped like a weapon. You better make this worth it, Wolfe. The DA's still chewing on that tape. I expect indigestion, Wolfe said. Sit down. 2 minutes later came Claire Delacroix, the widow, tall, composed, dressed in mourning that managed to look expensive rather than tragic. Behind her, escorted by Stebbins, came Merrill and Vane, both out on bail and wearing guilt-like perfume, one reeking of arrogance, the other of panic. Irene Talbot arrived last, pale and steady, clutching a small parcel. When everyone was seated, Wolfe looked like a magistrate in shirt sleeves. His forearms rested on the desk, fingers steepled. We are met, he said, to restore proportion to a world deformed by deceit. Mr. Goodwin, the recorder. I placed the machine on the table, Saul's handiwork, fresh from police HQ after Kramer's boys had made duplicates. Its reels gleamed like twin eyes. Merrill tried a smile. You're staging theatre now? Truth, Wolfe said, always deserves an audience. Vane shifted. My lawyer. We'll thank you later, Wolfe interrupted. At present, silence is your sole remaining dignity. He turned to Claire. Madam, your husband telephoned me on the night he died. He tried to point me toward what he'd found. The fragments surfaced through others, first a menu torn from the Mercury Club, later records tied to those accounts. Hours after that call, he was dead. Claire's fingers whitened on her gloves. Merrill's jaw twitched. Kramer's cigar froze mid-air. Wolfe continued. That, Inspector, is the line that untied the knot. Merrill knew the accounts were false, knew the exposure imminent, knew Delacroix must be silenced. What he did not know was that the mechanism of his deceit would betray him by its own precision. Merrill rose half an inch. You can't prove. I can, Wolfe said. Sit. He nodded to me. I flicked the switch. The machine hummed and Merrill's own voice filled the room. I protected the greater good. I didn't administer it. I merely arranged containment. When the word cyanide came from the speakers, Claire gasped. Irene flinched and Vane sagged as if struck. The reel clicked to silence. Wolfe let it linger before speaking. Inspector, I trust that suffices for admissibility. Kramer grunted. It'll do. He confessed clear as day. DA can polish it. Good, Wolfe said. But the confession alone is incomplete. We must understand the instrument. He turned his gaze on Vane. You procured the poison. Vane's voice cracked. He told me it was for experiments. I thought... Phooey. You thought nothing, Wolfe snapped. You obeyed greed disguised as patriotism. You believed Merrill's talk of economic salvation, of protecting investors. You mistook avarice for virtue and supplied the means of murder. Merrill's control shattered. You sanctimonious whale. You think your deduction matters. I built industries while you sat in this overstuffed den drinking beer. Indeed, Wolfe said softly, and you poisoned civilization while I cultivated orchids. We both have hobbies. Kramer leaned forward. That's enough speeches. Wolfe, you've got your confession. Why the parade? Because, Wolfe said, justice requires sequence. He nodded toward Irene. Miss Talbot. She stood, trembling only slightly, and laid her parcel on the desk. This is the real ledger, she said, the one Mr. Delacroix kept in the safe. Earlier, I only dared give Mr. Goodwin photostats. The bound book that arrived later was a plant. I couldn't give it before. I was afraid. Kramer took it, flipping pages. Looks genuine. Dates match the forgery, minus the post-mortem nonsense. Wolfe inclined his head. The forged copy was planted to discredit us and implicate Merrill's rivals. Miss Talbot risked her life to preserve the authentic record. Inspector, the lady's courage deserves acknowledgement. Kramer cleared his throat. Yeah, she'll get it in the report. Claire Delacroix rose. Mr. Wolfe, the retainer I paid, use it however you see fit. If it can help convict the men who killed my husband, it shall, Wolfe said. Your fee will convert to evidence donation through official channels. Mr. Goodwin will arrange the receipt. That was my cue. I jotted a note. Wolfe always liked his altruism documented. Merrill made one last try. This is all conjecture and theatrics. The recording was entrapment. The ledger could be fabricated. Sit, Kramer barked. You'll get your chance downtown. But Wolfe raised a hand. Allow him, Inspector. I prefer to conclude elegantly. He leaned forward, eyes half-lidded. Mr. Merrill, you claim the motive was patriotic duty, preventing economic panic. Yet the ledgers show transfers into your personal holding company. That is not patriotism, it is plunder. You also claim Delacroix's death was collateral necessity, but you overlooked chemistry. Cyanide leaves a bitter almond odor. Delacroix's body had none. Therefore, the poison was administered not orally but through the skin, likely on the cigarette you handed him during your reconciliation meeting. An efficient deceit. Merrill stared, realizing the precision of his own undoing. You, how could you? I listen, Wolfe said, and I think. The room went silent except for the fire ticking in the grate. Then Kramer rose, heavy but satisfied. You're a blasted miracle of logic, Wolfe. Not miracle, Wolfe replied. Method. Kramer's grin was brief but genuine. Either way, you make my job look sloppy. He turned to his men. Take them in. Stebbins moved forward. Merrill straightened his tie with the dignity of a man still calculating odds. Vane just looked relieved to be done fighting gravity. They were escorted out, their footsteps fading down the hall. When the door closed, Wolfe exhaled deeply and leaned back, reaching for the bell cord. "Fritz, beer." I said, "Make it 2. I'm feeling patriotic." Kramer paused at the threshold, cigar tilted. "You know, Wolfe, one of these days your fancy talk's going to hang you instead of them." Wolfe lifted his glass as Fritz returned with the tray. "If it does, Inspector, I shall hope you have the grace to testify eloquently." Kramer snorted. "Don't push it. Good night." He left without slamming the door, progress by his standards. The fire settled into an easy glow. Wolfe sipped his beer. I leaned back and stretched my legs toward the warmth. "You realize," I said, "we've just converted murder, politics, and finance into an evening's entertainment." He set down the glass. "You trivialize." "I narrate," I said. "Different verbs, same hobby." He frowned, but only mildly. "Archie, prepare a summary for the district attorney by morning. Include copies of the ledger, the recording transcript, and Miss Delacroix's affidavit. Precision is the armor of truth." "Right," I said, rolling a fresh sheet into the typewriter. "Armor's good, but I'd still rather have hazard pay." He ignored that, eyes half closed in contentment. "Delacroix's integrity is redeemed. His widow may sleep. I am satisfied." That was Wolfe's version of emotion. I finished typing the header and looked around the office. The burnished shelves, the smell of beer and paper, the faint echo of confessions that had just paid rent on justice. "Boss," I said, "you ever get tired of being right?" "Frequently," he said, "but it is preferable to the alternative." Fritz re-entered quietly. "Shall I bring supper, Herr Wolfe?" Wolfe glanced at the clock. 8:55. "Yes, roast duck. We must maintain our schedule despite mankind's misbehavior." He turned to me. "Archie, you will dine here." Music to my ears. When Fritz departed, Wolfe regarded me with that rare, grudging affection that he'd deny under oath. "You have acquitted yourself with competence." "Thanks," I said. "Next time I'll aim for brilliance." "Next time," he murmured, "we will avoid murder." "That's what you said last time," he almost smiled. "Then I am consistent." The rain outside had eased into a polite drizzle, tapping the window like an afterthought. I pulled the Gazette from the pile on my desk, the morning edition that had screamed "Wolfe shielding brokering." I crumpled it and tossed it into the fire. The headline blackened, curled, and disappeared, truth cleaning up after fiction. Wolfe watched it burn, then lifted his glass. "To intellect," he said. I raised mine. "To paychecks," he snorted. "Philistine." "Realist," I said. "And that, ladies and gentlemen, if anyone's still listening, is why I keep him around. Also," I added, draining my beer, "he pays for the beer." The fire popped in agreement. Outside, the city exhaled. Inside, the orchids slept above us, and Wolfe, his mind finally at rest, reached for the next case only in his dreams.